So we've been looking at Isaac and Rebekah's family, and we're going to continue there today. But let's get our bearings. Does anybody remember where we are in the storyline? Yep. Jacob just stole the blessing. And Esau said he was going to kill him. And who plotted the whole deception? His mom. Did she? Okay. It was her favorite, but yeah. Moving on. Memory verse. Who knows the memory verse? JD. You know Proverbs 3, 5, and 6? No? You do. You just ain't going to come out here and do it. Go ahead, Terry. No? It's on the back of all of our shirts. All of our Expressway shirts. Yep. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. I always get messed up at the end because King James reverses it. All right, so today we're going to hear an echo of the previous account. At this point, it's been 97 years since Isaac and Rebekah got together, she left Haran and come to marry him. Abraham had sent his servant to Haran to find a wife for Isaac because he didn't want her to marry one of the pagan women from Canaan. Alice. And God blessed the trip. Rebekah left with her brother's Laban's house, and he married her cousin. Now here, we'll have another trip to Haran. Now today's lesson is a whole lot of Bible reading, so Judy will take care of that. So we're going to go pick up where we left off, back up a couple verses. We'll start out in Genesis 27, verse 46. And at first we'll go through 28, verse 9. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of the sojournings that God gave to Abraham. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there. And that as he blessed him, he directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan Aram. And when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Neobeth. So where does Jacob begin his travels from? It's from last week's lesson. Beersheba. From his kitchen in Beersheba. So Isaac had sent Jacob to find a wife from his uncle. Interesting to me was Esau's response. He already had 2 wives. And it didn't matter that the mother didn't approve of them, but now he knows dad doesn't approve of them, so he goes out and does what? Gets a 3rd wife. This one from Ishmael. We think when they sent Ishmael away, he went far, far away. But obviously not too far, because here Esau can marry one of his daughters. Now let's do 10 through 22. So Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there the night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones at a place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up to heaven. At the top of it reached the heavens, and behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a full tenth to you. So what happened as Jacob slept? He had a dream.
You know, in 13 it said God, I think it said God stood at the top of the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
In his dream, did Jacob see him? Did he see his face?
He could have. Are you going because no man's seen the face of God?
I know.
So
113 is that they were trying to say that.
I would say yes, he saw the face of God, but he saw a pre-incarnate Christ. Everywhere in the Old Testament where you see people running into God, I believe it's the pre-incarnate Christ, because nobody can look upon God. When Adam and Eve walked in the garden after they sinned and God walked through in the cool of the night, it couldn't have been God the Father, because they would have been destroyed when they come face to face with him because they were sinful. So it had to be some other form, I always say pre-incarnate Christ, that they saw in the Old Testament. Yep.
Verse 20, then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will. Did he not trust God?
Well, if you go back even a little further, Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Jacob had no real relationship with God. Yeah. So, as Jacob does, he has conditions to his loyalty. He's trying to make a bargain with God. If he gives me all of this stuff, then he'll be mine. So who stood at the top of the ladder? How is it written in your Bible? All caps?
Just the first L. I mean, it's caps, but the L is bigger.
The Lord God.
Yeah. Usually when you see it written that way, it means a specific name of God. So there it is, Yahweh, in Hebrew. Now, how did God introduce himself? God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. Not Jacob quite yet. So what promises does God make to Jacob? There's a bunch of them. The land. Bunch of offspring like the dust of the earth. He reiterates that through your offspring, all the nations of the world will be blessed. Looking forward to Jesus. God says he will bless him where he goes. And God says he will return him to the land of Canaan. And God promises that he'll keep his promise. Who else got this same type of promise? Abraham and not Esau. Isaac. God is reiterating the promise through the generations.
In 22 where it says, I will give you a full tenth, is this where they, I mean, I know that's the tithe. Is this where it's been carried through the Bible in this verse?
No, all the way back when Abraham met Pops' favorite character in the Bible, Melchizedek, is the first mention of tenth. Now, offerings and gifts go all the way back to Adam and Eve and their sons, Cain and Abel, when they bring their offerings of the first fruits. But it doesn't mention tenth there. You don't get tenth till Abraham and Melchizedek.
And when he opened his grave, was it a fearful, or was it like he was in awe?
Probably fearful. Remember, he just spent the last 20 years deceiving his brother, stealing his birthright, lying and stealing his blessing, and having to leave town because he's going to die, and then you run into God. Probably wouldn't be too comforting.
So that's what he's in fear of, that God knows all this.
Yeah. This God that he's heard of from his father and grandfather, he now knows is real, which means everything he's done is probably not on the up and up. So my guess is that's why he wakes in fear, because he didn't even know God was here. What do you think the ladder represents? They make the case that it's some type of mediation or interaction between God and earth. That God has sovereign control over what happens on earth. He is knowing everything that everybody does.
Why did the angels use that to come down?
Angels are messengers. So that was the view of them coming down to see what's going on and bringing word back.
I thought angels flew. In the movies, they do.
I don't think all angels have wings. Some of them have 7 wings and 7. But anywho, the ones that Abraham saw at his tent were angels, and no mention of wings. There's several different classes of angels, probably more than we know or understand, but cherubim, cherubim, archangels, angels.
I think he,
What did the animals represent?
and do you notice when he's talking, if he's not quite sure, his voice goes softer and softer?
What do the animals represent?
Yeah,
What animals?
you know, in heaven, when they're talking those creatures, certain animals, lions' heads or.
Are you talking about the angels around the throne, the one that has the head of a lion? I think that's just how they look. I don't know that it represents anything.
But you never, you know, they don't, animals don't have spirits, so
Mm-mm.
why would they be in heaven or they represent something?
Well, they're just an angel with a head that we can best describe as looks like blank. Get into some of the Old Testament angels, and it's described as a giant eye with 7 bands rotating around it, with eyes all around it. More than we can comprehend.
Well, my sister, you're part of Swedenborg.
Swedenborg?
Okay, well, she got caught up in Swedenborg. And there's no way you can convince her that your animals, your pets aren't waiting for you to cross that bridge with you. And this is what Swedenborg,
It would be wonderful if our pets were there waiting for us. You know, my dog that died years ago was my favorite dog of all time. Don't tell my new dog.
2 of them I've got.
But here's the problem. They're a good and perfect gift from God. They bring us comfort, joy, happiness, peace, patience, all things we won't need in heaven, because God will provide them all. Will there be animals in heaven? I do believe there will be. Will your animal be in heaven? I don't believe so.
Well, wouldn't it be like us anyway, just have spirits?
Well, we go originally just as spirits, but we do get glorified bodies.
You need to tell the class what you learned about silence in heaven for the first time.
No, that was just for you. That one was just for you. That joke was just for you. I am not saying that online.
You'll have to say that.
You're trying to get me in trouble. I heard a joke last Friday that I just had to tell Judy because she always messes with me, but we'll do it later.
Remind them after class.
So how did Jacob mark the place?
With a stone.
Stone pillar. Yep. And how did he desire to return to his father's house? In peace. Interesting, isn't it? Because all the turmoil, not all, I'm sure, because I know what brothers are like, but most of the turmoil in his father's house was caused by who? By him. And his only desire is not that God will, correct and help him change his mistakes, but that he can go back and live with the inheritance and the blessing and everybody be at peace with his bad decisions. Yeah, his mom started. Yeah, his mom was definitely a helper. She was an enabler. You're just trying to get me in trouble with Judy. All right. So Bethel, where he finds, is about 50 miles into his journey and roughly the center of the promised land of Jerusalem. Anybody know what Bethel means? Beth means house. El, E-L, is one of God's names. Elohim, El, so house of God. Now let's fast forward to John chapter 1, verses 49 through 51. Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, You are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered him, because I told you, I saw you under a fig tree. Do you believe? You will see greater things than this. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you'll see heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So what connection between this and what we just read? This one's not a dream, but yeah, same occurrence, but there's a few slight differences.
So this was actual.
Yeah, this is Jesus. Remember when he calls Nathanael? He says, I saw you under the fig tree when I called you. And Nathanael said, truly you are the King of Israel, the Son of God. And he said, just because I saw you and told you I saw you and where you came from, now you believe. You're going to see greater things than this. You'll see angels ascending and descending from heaven upon the Son of Man. So it definitely alludes to Jacob's dream and Jacob's ladder, but it changes something. The mediator between God and man was the ladder going back and forth to the earth from heaven. Now it all descends on the Son of Man. Jesus is going to be the mediator between God and man. Just as God has promised land, descendants, and blessings to Abraham and Isaac, now he's offered the same to Jacob, and according to Isaac's blessing of Jacob. Jacob was given a vision of angels moving to and from heaven as a sign of reassurance that God was intimately involved with the affairs of earth. It's a clear sign that Jacob that God was able to accomplish all that he had promised. Another reminder for us is that God's faithfulness and sovereignty. As Jesus refers back to this dream some 1,800 years later, an allusion to the new disciples would surely be recognized. He placed himself as the ladder. He is pointing out his role as mediator through God, which would bless all the nations. The promise of the seed that was given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. While Jacob was looking forward to the promise, Jesus is the one that we now place our trust in to see God's promise fulfilled. But before the promise could be fulfilled, Jacob needed a wife. So let's move on to Genesis 29, verses 1 through 30. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep laying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large. And when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, my brothers, where do you come from? They said, we are from Haran. He said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? They said, we know him. He said to them, is it well with him? They said, it is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. He said, behold, it is still high day, and it is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water your sheep and go pasture them. But they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are bone of my bone, and you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. And Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what are your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you for 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I might go in her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went in her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete this week of this one, and we will give you the other one in return for serving me another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a servant. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban another 7 years. So did you notice the similarities between Eleazar's visit and Jacob's visit? Both the well, people around the well, flocks. It changes up a little bit because Eleazar asked God that somebody would give him water and water his camels. In this one, Jacob waters the other animals. Did anybody accompany Jacob on his journey? No, all by himself, a little different than Eleazar too. Who did Jacob first encounter at the well? Who did Jacob first encounter when he come to the well?
Oh, no, the other.
Yep, the other shepherds. And what did they inform him of? The shepherds. That they knew Laban, and here comes his daughter.
So was she the last to come?
Yeah. And what was Jacob's response? Because I get a kick out of it. He sees Rachel coming in the distance. What's he tell the other shepherds to do? Hurry up, water your sheep, and get out of here. And they say, we can't. We only roll the stone away at one time. The other interesting thing, we often think of Jacob as this little, meek, weak houseman. But he rolls this giant boulder out of the way himself when he sees Rachel. So he's not as small and meek and weak as we think. He obviously has to have some sort of strength, because when he saw Rachel, he could do what they were waiting for more people to come to do. Yeah, he's showing off. How are Jacob and Rachel related? Cousins. How did Laban receive Jacob? Kiss, hugged him, and welcomed him right in. So what was Jacob doing for the first month that he was there? He was working. Yeah. For the first month, he was just working, probably getting to know Rachel.
So he gave up 22 years of his life.
By the time it's over and done, pretty close. 7 for Leah, 7 for Rachel, then 7 for something else.
And year 3.
So what did Laban ask Jacob based on the relationship?
To work for him for free.
Nah, what was his wages? Not for free. Wanted to know what his wages would be to work for him. Yep, the wages. The wages he wants is a wife. particular wife, the younger daughter.
I always thought Leah did that on her own.
No, that was all Daddy. I told you last week Jacob would meet his match when he meets Laban.
So do you think Leah was her dad's favorite?
No, I think her dad, I don't know that she would have been his dad's favorite. I think Dad just figured, God is blessing all the work that this man does in my house. How can I get another 7 years out of it? I'll give him both daughters and get another 7 years.
I thought maybe because of her being almost blind, the father,
You take it as she's almost blind?
yeah, and the father did that to get rid of her.
Because we honestly don't know exactly what that phrase means. It can be as simple as she had dull brown eyes instead of bright sparkly brown eyes, which was less favored trait of the area. It could mean she was ugly, not easy to look at, or it could mean she was blind, partially blind. But we don't know. It doesn't give us the whole explanation.
He did say the older had to be married before the younger could get married.
Yeah. We don't even know if that's true. That could have just been, hey, this is our custom. I need 7 more years out of you. I think Laban was just a little more crooked than Jacob. He was a little better at it, had a few more years of training.
So it runs in the family.
Uh-huh. It does. Deception runs in the family. From Laban to Rachel to Jacob. Does Laban accept the agreement? What are the differences here between Eleazar's visit and Jacob's? What did Eleazar come with? Came with all kinds of gifts. So that tells us he came with nothing. Because in the Old Testament era, you had to pay a bride price. To get married, you had to pay the father a certain amount of money. From what I could find, somewhere around 50 shekels. You would get roughly 1/2 to 1 shekel a month working. So you would pay 50 shekels to buy your bride. And we already talked about why you paid a bride price back then. But in case you forgot, men died quite a bit. So the father would have that money to take care of the daughter if the husband died. So you paid the bride price to ensure that the daughter was taken care of even if you died.
Why didn't his dad give his money?
Maybe his dad was still a little sore about being lied to. I don't know. He sent him away with nothing. Odd. I tend to think he didn't give him anything because he's probably still holding into, I'm going to give Esau the larger amount, so I'm not dividing my money yet. Because that whole favoritism between sons, he wasn't ready to give in yet. So he sends him away with nothing. Or it could be, it's time to get out of the basement, son, and learn how the real world works. And you send him out and let him figure it out. Could be that. Huh? Yep, doesn't get to see him for 22 years. Yep. And he thought he was going to die in our last lesson, remember? So he doesn't even think he's going to be around in 22 years to see him. So we learned that Leah, something with the eyes, I think it's more tied to beauty than it is to anything else, just because it compares and contrasts the two sisters. This one has dim eyes, and this one is beautiful in all ways. So I think it has something to do with appearance. That's usually the way I take it. One's not as pretty as the other. One's not as easy to find a husband for.
She had to be in on it.
No.
She could have said no.
No, she could not have said no. Back then, you didn't pick your husband, your dad did. I didn't pick my wife back then. My dad did. My dad would get with your dad. They would set it up when you're 6 months old, a year old. They would arrange all those weddings. You didn't marry for love back then. You married for security. So families would switch, pick and choose. So the daughter had no choice. I don't think Leah can be blamed at all for this because Daddy would have said who she was marrying. You'd have been used to it if you lived back then, though. It wouldn't seem as odd. Not back then. They would have beat it out of both of us. Our mouths wouldn't have worked back then. Huh? Yeah, there's still countries in the world that still do that today. So after 7 years, how did Laban respond to Jacob's request for a wife? What did he do? He prepares this big feast, whole day event. Brings in a whole bunch of people. And then how does Laban deceive them? Sneaks the oldest daughter in at the last minute. Interesting side note. So, Jacob deceives his father, who has bad eyes and can't tell it's him. Goes up there, finds Leah that has bad eyes, and he ends up taking her as a wife because he's probably partied too much and his eyes were pretty dim at the end of the night. He can't tell who's who and ends up with another wife. All bad vision tied together. So, the question is, do you think Leah was aware of the plan?
I think so. She surely couldn't be just letting that.
Yeah, I don't think it was probably a 7-year notice, but I think it's, hey, he wants a wife, you're going there tonight. So, and it sounds weird today because how could he not tell the difference in their face? Well, they wore that veil back then over their face all the way through the consummation of the marriage. So she was slightly obstructed by a veil, and he was probably overly obstructed by too much partying.
You think they got him drunk?
I do. I think that's why it says waited till evening, when he had made it through the barrels of wine and all the partying and meeting with all the guests, and he wasn't quite right in the head anymore. So how's Jacob learn of the deception? Next day, when he sobers up and the veil comes off, he realizes something's wrong. What consolation did Laban offer Jacob? Yeah.
Only work another 7 years and you can have her.
Yep, just another 7 years. You said it was like days for the first one, you know. What's another 7? It's a couple more days. Does Jacob decide to work the other 7 years? He must have really liked Rachel. What gift does Laban give his daughters? Maid servants. Bilhah and Zilpah. And what do we learn about Jacob's relationship with his wives? He had a favorite. As if we didn't know that was a bad idea already. We're going to find out even more how bad of an idea it is. So we're about out of time. Any questions, or we can try to do the... I don't think I have enough time to even read that, but... Any questions? Anything interesting? Mm-hmm.
So Jacob is referred to have been reading Micah and there's a lot of references, Micah's one of the minor prophets, a lot of references to the leaders of Jacob, the house of Jacob, the descendants of Jacob. And it's odd because I thought they refer to, a lot of the kings are being compared to David. And then you hear mentioned sometimes, every once in a while, Abraham or Isaac, but rarely Jacob. So why
I think he's being mentioned because from Jacob comes the 12 tribes that form all of Israel. So you have Abraham, you have Isaac, but Jacob is the beginning of the true nation. You have the 12 descendants of the 12 tribes. And what I find is interesting is we've seen sinful after sinful after sinful person being used in God's plan. And even sinful acts being used in God's plan. And we serve a God that knows all that and can use all that and still bring his plan into fruition. It shows the sovereignty of God, even over man's sinful choices. I think that's something we could take great rest and comfort in, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we know who's going to bring tomorrow. And even if we make mistakes, doesn't mean we can't be used, because God used billions of people that made mistakes continually. And the Bible points them out. It's one of my arguments when somebody says the Bible's written by men. No, men would leave all the bad stuff out. It'd be this wonderful, great story of all these perfect people. There's not one perfect person but Christ in all of the Bible. It shows how sinful and flawed we all are. Yeah, like King David, yep. A man after God's own heart, an adulterer, a murderer. If you'd have met him in that time, you wouldn't have believed he was God's man. But God's still a man after my own heart. All right, let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you that you do use sinful men, sinful people like us. And even though we don't know what tomorrow brings, we serve the one who brings tomorrow. We thank you for the rest and peace that we can have in your sovereignty. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.